Welcome to this Saturday, September 21st edition of the Armstrong-Williams Show. We return with two of our favorites, Lora Ries and Bruce Fein. Lori, welcome back. You know, with the presidential elections are right around the corner, sometimes what we need to do is just go back to history. History is the best indicator of the future. And given your experience as a former director of Border Security and Immigration Center, give us the history of how immigration in the United States and how it has changed or evolved to where we are today.
Well, the U.S., like every other country, set up immigration laws, and the concept being that not everyone can come in, and so therefore who shouldn't come in, and who do we want to come in, and for what reason, and how many. And so going back to the 1880s, also a key part of our immigration law was not becoming a public charge, and that you should either be able to make enough money to support yourself or have family or other sponsors that would support you so that you didn't become a public charge. And over the decades, the rules that were established in terms of who can come in, how many per year, who should not be allowed in, has been watered down, disregarded, ignored. And particularly in the 1970s, the illegal alien population started to increase. And so the demand to come to the U.S. is so great that the legal limits that were placed in the law made it such that people found it easier, faster to come illegally into the U.S. rather than wait in line, which could take years to come the legal way. And that has increased ever since the 1970s in particular. And now we're at the point under this Biden-Harris administration where the laws have just been disregarded, whether it's the legal programs, the illegal programs, and we are seeing unprecedented numbers, over 10.2 million inadmissible aliens that Customs and Border Protection have encountered, plus another more than 2 million known gotaways. And those who still want to come legally are chumps, you know, made to be chumps. Because we're seeing these illegal numbers just go through the roof. And we no longer have an immigration system because we're no longer honoring our laws. It's unrecognizable.
You know, I was reading these stats from just the state of Maryland alone. 165 women, just in this year alone, has been sexually assaulted. It's 165. And it's about 3,620 nationally. And you read the stories about Colorado, where the gangs are boarding up apartment buildings and taking over as if it's becoming territorial. You familiar with Rachel Morgan in Maryland, who's absolutely just viciously murdered and assaulted like an animal. So where am I going with this? When you talk about immigration as a source of pride and honor just to be a citizen of the United States, many people have not heard during this migration of migrants coming here wanting to destroy America, disrupt our rule of law, kill innocent people for no reason at all, rape, bring in gangs and just pillage. When did this change?
Well, there seems to be a globalist view, and they are weaponizing mass migration. And it's not just in the U.S., it's been in other parts of the world as well. But we are living it here in the U.S. right now, where...
Explain that. Weaponized by globalists around the world.
Right. So George Soros, for example, funds organizations around the world to to facilitate mass migration into countries. And so right now in the U.S. and points south all the way down to Panama, our federal government, using our tax dollars, are paying non-governmental organizations that have created an extensive network and infrastructure to help facilitate transport, large numbers of illegal aliens to the U.S. and throughout the U.S. And when we have an open border under this administration's policies, people around the world take note. They want to come here. Many have already been safely resettled elsewhere for years.
But we're talking about the crime and the disruption that's being brought now. How unusual is this?
Well, again, unprecedented. That becomes a overused term under this administration, but that's what we're facing. When you truly open the border, when people from 180 countries around the globe are coming, with them come a lot more criminals, terror threats, etc.
But is it true that Venezuela and other countries are opening up their jails, sending all the least common denominator of their society, just flooding them to America to get rid of them? Is that true?
It's a tactic. We saw it. We saw Cuba do it decades ago, and it seems that Venezuela has done it as well. Why not? I mean, it's an escape valve for those countries and for those leaders not to have to pay to detain them, to deal with the crime there. Why not send them to some other country when their door is wide open?
And so it's never happened on any other administration watch the way it's happening on the Biden-Harris watch.
Not to these numbers.
Not to this extent.
Right.
You know, let me turn to you, because what we're dealing with today are the issues that Americans really care about. You know, I go back to John F. Kennedy, to Eisenhower, to Reagan, and it seems like they're always talking about crime, juvenile crime, inner city crime, the drug wars, how they're flooding our streets with drugs. It seems like every time I go through history, over the last 3 or 4 decades, we always talk about it, and I'm so stunned when I listen to these speeches, whether it's Reagan, even Walter Mondale, even Jack Kennedy. It's as if it's the times we're living in today. So what has really changed, or what has escalated when you look at the escalation of crime in America?
Well, there was a Wickersham Commission on Crime under Herbert Hoover. It's a lot earlier than Ronald Reagan or John F. Kennedy.
Correct.
Crime has been a problem for many, many years. And it escalated in the 1970s. It was almost satirized in West Side Story. Officer Krupke, you know, we always have psychologists need to treat criminals instead of incarcerating them, because a very, very disproportionate percentage of crimes is committed by a very few number of individuals who commit literally hundreds of crimes. But it has gone down as well. When Rudy Giuliani was mayor of New York, crime plunged. It was like no broken glasses. So it's not true, I don't think, that there's just a one-way trajectory at crime. The last year, no, crime has not soared. It's unacceptable, any crime. We want to diminish it to zero. But this is not new. And we talk about, I was appointed when I first came to Washington shortly after. There was an interagency committee on illegal aliens. It was estimated at that time there were 11 million illegal aliens. And when Reagan was president, you know, he passed an Immigration Act in 1986 with Congress that amnestied in like 3 million immigrants. But you jump back to 11 million once again. And I don't think it's as much globalist as the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. What drives the majority of immigrants is not to come here to commit rape. You can commit rape anywhere. They want jobs. And the Chamber of Commerce and Business wants to hire people at lower rates. It's a financial matter for them. And sure, there are immigrants who are criminals, like they're in any category of persons. But they're the ones, the Chamber's the one that they don't want these restrictions really enforced. It drives down wages. They're in the business what? Make money. All businesses do that. And that's the enduring influence. I remember when we were thinking about, you know, immigration reform when I was in the department, the Chamber of Commerce was against anything we wanted to do because it's money for them. So I think we need to go back to H.L. Mencken. There's simple answers to every complex question, but it's wrong. This is a very complex question.
You know, H.L. Mencken once owned the Baltimore Sun, a paper that we own today, and I was also a big fan of his. I just want to let you know who that man was. He started what we now own. Challenge, Bruce Fein.
The Chamber is a player. There are a lot of factors who want open borders, but we cannot dismiss the globalist efforts to cause division, to bring down the U.S. from within, and so many benefit. I mean, when would we have talked about before Democrats voting against a bill that would prevent illegal aliens from voting. So, you know, a party benefits when so many people come into the U.S. and will be counted in the census, those numbers will be used to draw congressional districts, giving states more representation and more power in Congress, giving those states more electoral votes for president. So there are many factions, special interests that benefit from this. The non-governmental organizations that have now become addicted to the federal grant money they get. There are organizations, faith-based organizations, that make far more money now off of federal grant money, our tax dollars, than they do church donations.
But that's a fraction of the money that the big businesses get out of getting labor that won't join unions, and they can pay substandard wages. We have situations where children are working in factories. I'm not trying to suggest, and I don't applaud these other elements, but it's very complex, and the enduring influence is the financial incentive of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And with regard to the political maneuvering, it was the Republicans who killed a bill that was drafted by James Langford of Oklahoma. He's not Code Pink. He's about as close to Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz as you can get. And he was satisfied, and he was able to get Democrats to agree it wasn't everything that he wanted, to a bill that would have put much tougher clamps on illegal immigration, and it failed because the Republicans ran away.
So let me interject again. I'm trying to go somewhere on this road. Is the country much worse off on the Democrats than the Republicans? From the last 12 of the last 16 years, Democrats have occupied the White House. Have those policies contributed to what we're seeing in America today? And Bruce briefly talked about the crime. He found a way to pivot back to immigration. But was he saying that crime is no worse today than it was decades ago? Is that what you interpreted him saying?
I disagree with that.
But I think that's what he said, though.
Well, you should ask me, because I was the one who used the language.
I plan to, by the way.
Okay, good.
Okay, go ahead.
The FBI is not collecting all the data. I mean, there's an effort afoot to make it look like crime is lower, because if you aren't collecting the data, then it looks lower. If you're not prosecuting cases, then crime looks lower. If you aren't keeping people in jail, then crime looks lower. And yet, this pro-crime policies by prosecutors, by local law enforcement in certain cities and states to release criminals immediately back onto the street is endangering those communities. And then they are repeatedly harmed by that because we aren't prosecuting and we're not keeping them in jail.
Now, as you requested, I'm asking you.
No, I did not say crime was not a
But
problem.
I think somebody could have interpreted that way, listening to this
well,
conversation.
now they can disinterpret it.
Okay, help us.
I didn't suggest that. I said that crime is not always on the same trajectory. Sometimes it rises.
But is it worse today? That is the question.
Compared to what is your benchmark? From when? The 1930s, 1970s, 1920s, 2023? You got to give me a benchmark. And compared
Since
to
Trump
what?
left the White House.
I think it's about the same. At least the last
Wow.
FBI statistics were that in the current fiscal year, serious crime has diminished, not increased.
Listen, I definitely need a break. I'm just flabbergasted, actually. But I think it's important to have these conversations.
Yeah.
A deep dive is what we call it. We'll be back. You really believe that?
Not me, these are the FBI statistics.
Okay. So Steve Laffey, former presidential candidate, financial guru. You've been listening to Lori and Bruce Fein, and I wanted to have you listen to it because you're going to add a different perspective to this conversation. People say every 4 years, my economy, I'm worse off than I was 4 years ago. The poor are getting poorer. The rich are getting richer. We have been, and I've gone back and I pulled the tapes and I watched this in every election cycle. The poor is getting poorer. The rich are getting richer. But how much has really changed? And is this an indictment that government can't really change the trajectory of the poor? And if people go out and earn and build wealth, they cannot change that either, because that's in the individual getting a few breaks along the way and their hard work and their sacrifice and being and finding the ingenuity and the creativity to find something that the marketplace demands.
Well, first of all, honored to be with you and your two eminent guests, who I know who they are and do a great job. The backtrack is Republicans have always wanted legal immigration because they want cheap labor. The Democrats have always wanted because they thought they would get votes. And that's the way it's been going on for a long, long time. They refuse to come up with any solutions. Yes, the question asked since Reagan ran again, are you better off than you were 4 years ago, is a very important question. And in many cases, for the most part, America is worse off. If we were to judge America by having more, faster video games, we're better off. If you want to define America by what happened to the middle class that was built up after World War II and then started to be destroyed in the 60s and now is totally destroyed, where people can't buy homes, where young people, where the people, and they call this a K economy, but you know, the people at the bottom do they own silver today? Do people making $50,000, $70,000 a year own a bunch of silver? Do they have a way of getting out of the US dollar to avoid what's about to happen? They don't. Are they more vulnerable when interest rates rise because a higher percentage of what they do is involved in debt, whether it's a mortgage or consumer debt? They are. But what we have are two parties that are trying to only go after what really benefits the rich. And that's what's happening. And so, yes, we are worse over. And by any stretch, and Laura alluded to this in a way, by any stretch over any 20-year period since I've been alive, there is more crime. There's clearly more crime. Does anybody remember 20 years ago Walgreens closing stores because people were stealing so much from them? Does anybody remember 25 years ago trying to get a razor blade and seeing it locked up? Nobody remembers that. Versus 14 years ago, I lived 45 minutes or 15 minutes north of Denver. When I first moved to Fort Collins, Colorado, I went to Denver 10 times a year. I haven't been back there in 3 years except for a luncheon. I wouldn't go to Denver on a bet. So maybe crime's lower in Denver because I haven't been robbed because I'm not there. But people are scared, and they are scared of what's happening to this country when it comes to crime, when it comes to illegal immigration, and they are frustrated by the lack of solutions offered by either party, no matter who's in power, Armstrong.
But let me just stay with you. So this is a little more honing in on government. And I think what you're saying in a deeper way is that government and our tax codes and the economy can only help those that bring something to the economy. That if your livelihood is centered around social welfare programs and programs where you think the government can take care of you and you don't have to play a role in having the more responsibility in your well-being, eventually it may work out for a while, but eventually you're gonna crash somewhere. So I guess when we talk about the rich or the middle class and the haves versus the have-not, what really separates them apart sometimes can be legacy, sometimes can be inheritance, but most times it's a quality education.
It is, 100%. And I'm a living example, the son of a toolmaker with a very troubled family that went to Bowdoin College and Harvard Business School at the age of 22 because of hard work. And I probably had less empathy for people trying to pull themselves out of poverty when I was younger than I do now. But the solutions to this are things that, for example, Kamala Harris is running for president, and her idea of restoring the middle class is to send everybody checks. Her idea is that if you start a new company, you get $50,000 tax deduction. This will not restore the middle class. The Laffey, I'll start 9 LLCs next year and buy 9 tractors worth $50,000 and sell them for 40, take the deductions because I'm in a 40% marginal tax rate and make money. That's what people will do. And so the people running the country don't understand that what we need for people who want to work is a way to get out of poverty. We need low marginal tax rate as you work your way up. And in this country, you could lose your entire housing allowance, have 100% marginal tax rate as you move from making $30,000 to $31,000, right? So we have lots of issues we have lots of problems that need solutions, and we don't have elected officials give them to us. When it comes to immigration as the #1 thing that people are concerned about, why are we not focused on south of our border? Venezuela has lost 7 million people who have left their country. They have doctors who are now prostitutes on the border of Colombia. We did nothing about Hugo Chavez Armstrong. We did nothing about that. They had a per capita income adjusted for today's dollars in 2010 of over $10,000. The last I looked, it's $483 per capita in Venezuela. It's been destroyed. And we've done nothing about it. If we focused on the southern part, Mexico and South as our friends, and help grow their economies and not China's since 2000 by letting them into the World Trade Organization, we wouldn't have these problems. People in general don't want to leave Guatemala. I've been to Guatemala. I've seen it. I've been across the border. You mentioned, Armstrong, that 165 women were raped in Maryland this year by illegal aliens. I went across the border in 2004 with Dr. Robin Hoover, and I still can't sleep at night sometimes because now I'm thinking about the young ladies unaccompanied coming from Altar, Mexico, where I was, south of Phoenix, coming north. And I said to Dr. Robin Hoover, can we grab some of these girls and take them with us? They're going to be raped at the border. He says, you can't even look up. Steve, right now you need to look at the ground because people are driving by with machine guns. You're only safe because you're next to me. And yes, these girls are going to be raped at the border tonight. What kind of country do we have when we allow this to happen every single night, Armstrong? We can solve these problems, but no one at the top of the political government wants to. They don't want to, or they would. They're not hard problems to solve.
So it brings me back to you because he packed a lot in there. Most Americans feel that they're last. They're no longer first. But yet you have millions of migrants coming across the borders for the American dream. And many of them realize the American dream. Why is it? Is there still a reality of an American dream for them crossing the borders, costing their lives, raped, exploited, human trafficking? And yet, Americans will tell you that dream is no more. What do you say?
That's right. Americans are being put last, and Americans feel like the American dream is slipping away. The ability to own a home or for their children to own a home is getting farther and farther away. The ability to have a single job that pays enough to afford gas, groceries, and rent. Americans are struggling. They're living paycheck to paycheck. And yet they are seeing in communities and cities across the country tens of thousands of illegal aliens and people descending on their communities and overcrowding public schools. You talked about the need for good quality education, overcrowding emergency rooms, so parents can't, get that doctor's appointment for their child or themselves or see a specialist for months at a time. These are the everyday issues Americans are feeling and getting crushed by because they just see masses coming in and are first in line to receive these benefits and housing and rental subsidies, et cetera, et cetera. Americans are fed up.
So Bruce, why does it appear, and is this a perception? You listen to Steve, you listen to Lori, it seems like we're willing to abandon our rule of law, abandon our legal system, prosecuting, locking people up, to satisfy what populism has become, the voice of the minority, the voice of those that feel oversensitive that America owes them something. the voice that say, well, we have a standard for you, as she talked about. It was once an honor to go through the process to become an American citizen now, but you know, all you need to do is just become an American citizen. None of the rule, but it seems as though our laws are being bent for those that don't respect our laws, that are not really here for long term and really care about what it has taken to build this country. What has happened to laws?
Well, I think you may have overstated the situation. I know many immigrants naturalized, in fact.
But I'm not talking about them.
Okay, those
well, that's not who I'm talking about.
We're talking about
illegals. I'm talking about those that flaunt the law, disrespect the law, deface our monuments, spit on police officers, attack them, and they don't even get a citation. Those are the ones I'm talking about.
Well,
let's speak to them.
I'm not sure they don't get a citation. You cited all those.
They don't end up in jail. I tell you what,
rape.
If I attack the police officer, they put me in jail. I'll tell you that.
No.
You couldn't attack the police officer.
I think some of the more prominent crimes committed by illegal aliens, don't worry, they're being prosecuted for murder. They're not getting a traffic citation.
I'm talking about across the board. They can do things that we can't as American citizens, and they don't get locked up.
Well, I'm not sure. I don't know whether.
But I ask you.
No, I do not believe that if an illegal alien commits murder or rape, they get a less harsh judgment than here in the United States.
I didn't say anything about rape.
Okay.
I say assaulting police officers.
I think anybody who assaults a police officer has to pay a price.
But they
now,
don't.
One of the things, I don't agree with that. And I think also that talk about the minority, there have been several instances just in the last few years where prosecutors who are oftentimes elected, they were removed from office because they weren't tough on crime. Even in places like San Francisco or Philadelphia, liberal bastions. So the idea of minorities,
why did
the majority voted them out?
Why did they vote them out?
Because they didn't like what they were doing. But it shows the majority ultimately had their say.
How many people must be die and must be harmed before we respect, before you toss them out? Do you know what it takes to toss them out?
No,
it could be 2 or 3 years. Do you know the price people pay until then?
You can have referendum. You had a recall situation.
How long does a referendum take? How many people die or harmed before the referendum?
No, listen, I'm not justifying that.
Politics
doesn't move at warp speed.
But shouldn't the laws, shouldn't justice be blind?
Of course
the laws work for everybody?
Of course it should be. But imperfection is part of the human condition. Nothing's ever going to be perfect. We should strive for that. But to suggest something's imperfect, therefore we can do better, not always true. The cure can't be worse than the disease. Otherwise, you don't want to go to the cure. And I'm saying that our political process has sent messages to prosecutors who aren't tough enough. They're not in jobs anymore. And they're replaced by people who won on being what? Hard on crime.
Let me get Steve in here, because I have no idea who's coming up next on my platform. I want somebody to tell me, because I have no idea. I'm giving you a hint. I got to ask this to Steve. Can you imagine that you can go into a store? Do you know how hard we work to build businesses and employ people and give people choices in the marketplace, and yet you can go and steal up to $1,000 before you're arrested? And Gavin Newsom just passed a law, if you steal $50,000 or more in an establishment, then you'll be arrested. What about $1? What about $2,500? $2,500, depending on the business owner, is a lot of money. What are we saying to the business class in America?
Well, we're saying especially to the small business class, we don't care about you at all. And we said that over and over and over again for a long time under many administrations. But right now, you're right, in California, don't think criminals aren't smart enough to know that if they run into a store, they look at receipts, take $990 and run out. They won't be prosecuted. That's actually a true statement in parts of California and other parts of our country. So people have organized, criminals, illegal aliens, some of them not, of course. And don't get me wrong, people, listen, if I was really poor in Venezuela and I could put a Bitcoin code
Steve, hold that point, because I realize you're coming back with us. My man Greg just confirmed. Bruce, I'm going to say goodbye to you. I hate to see you go, though. I hate to see you go.
Yeah, but crocodile tears.
Yes, I really do, because Robert Patillo is in the studio, believe it or not, all the way from Atlanta.
Oh,
must be something going on in this city.
Well, he ran a good race.
Laura, you're not going anywhere. Okay. Don't worry, we'll be back. We'll pick up with Steve when we get back. Don't go away.
Okay, all right.
Oh, wait, Bruce.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence. There's a lot of poverty, and It's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. And welcome back. Steve, Laffey, Robert Patillo is joining us now. We'll get to him shortly. Steve, continue the conversation.
Well, I do think that we have to find a way to propose solutions that the American public wants and will abide by. And I don't think we're seeing that from the top. It's going to have to come from people, well, the Heritage Foundation does a good job on this, and other groups, but we've got to go forward. And I know we're talking about some different topics, but the crimes committed that come to this country, we have to have a law that when you've hired illegal aliens and we've caught you, we arrest the chief executive officer of the company. We don't go after the low people. If you want things to stop, you need to go after the top people. We've got to have laws that say, if you come here, illegal aliens should not have access to our public schools. Our public school test scores, due to unions controlling everything, but in many ways in big cities, because young people can't learn with people who can't speak their language, right? So a lot of things are contributing to this disaster in America, where people do feel hopeless, Armstrong. They feel they cannot get ahead. And while we know most illegals who come here want to work, and I'd be one of them, as I said, I'd be heading this way if I was really poor in Nicaragua. I would. But that doesn't mean I should. And we also can do a lot more within our country at the border. We saw, for example, that President Biden on June 24th did an executive order. It's not really working, but it's the beginning of what would work to tell Mexico, you're in charge, Mexico. We're putting you're in charge of our illegal aliens. Every time we see 3,000 people at the border, we're raising tariffs another 1%. Have fun. And guess what? By the time they get to be 20, 25%, 30%, and nothing's coming this way, things will change. Money speaks. It just takes a strong leader who understands what has to happen. There are many other things that can be done. For documented, so we need people to pick strawberries, okay? I get it. We don't have enough American workers to pick strawberries. Meet them at the border. Withhold 20% of the wages. Transfer them safely, not by these coyotes, to California. Pick the strawberries, decent place to live, and when you get back to the border, we've got, if you made 20 grand, we got 7 grand waiting for you at the border to take back to your family. There we go back. Work on making Central America some viable democracies. We're too scared to do it. Mike Pompeo in 2019 told Maduro to leave the country. He was with a Russian advisor at the airplane, had to leave that day. He's still there. That means the Monroe Doctrine really isn't working, combined with the fact that we have weak leaders, that we need strong leaders to take care of this problem. And we don't have it, Armstrong.
Robert Patillo, welcome back to our broadcast house. As I was saying to Lori and Bruce and Steve, I've been going back through old documentaries, old tapes, old footage. And I was really struck by what people consider to be minorities in the country. And what I've concluded, it really doesn't matter who has been in the White House, really since Lyndon Baines Johnson. Americans who happen to be black overall is complaining about the same thing, whether it's housing, the economy, lack of education, lack of wealth, lack of high-paying jobs. That narrative has not changed no matter who has been in the White House. And I kept going deeper and deeper, trying to do research. Even under Obama, I thought I would find it there. There's got to be at least one White House where they've made this substantial leap of progress, but it's just not there. And then I said, well, and then when Aaron said that you're in the House today, I said, and I'm asking you this question as a historian, why is that? And will it ever change? It seems like it's getting worse.
Oh, well, it's not getting worse. T.S. Eliot once said that day to day nothing changes, but over time everything's different. And what we're seeing is that over the course of that 50 years, if you're living day to day, you're going to have the same issues. But over the course of that long span of history, we can see the economic growth of African Americans. We can see the fact that 2 of the last 4 presidents perhaps will be African American. We can see the number of African Americans who are in high ranking positions, both in academia and corporate America. We can see the GDP numbers for black people are far higher than they were previously. And so things are changing over time, but we do not make big jumps in America. America is very much built on this conceptualization around homeostasis, that we want to maintain our institutions as they exist currently versus doing the type of radical changes that are needed to change those policies. Now, if we go back to the Republican Party of the 1860s, the post-war Republican Party, the radical Republicans of the House, what we see is they proposed things that needed to go into place in the 1860s and 1870s that can still be put into place today that will help the economic opportunities of African Americans. We didn't get giant land grants as some people did. We weren't the ones in Oklahoma who could be the Sooners who were able to march off hundreds of acres of property. They're now some of the biggest agribusinesses in the country. So we have to start thinking legislatively about making big jumps and big changes as opposed to nibbling around the edges. But what we're seeing right now is an effort to pull these things back. We're attacking diversity initiatives. We're attacking affirmative action. We're already seeing the African American enrollment at Ivy League institutions is down after the Supreme Court's decision. We're seeing major corporations saying they're not going to invest in bringing more African Americans into those companies anymore because of fear that they'll be considered affirmative action hires, etc. We have to push the ball forward to make those changes in a large way and not allow these things to be pulled back.
What, okay, I get that. And it seems you speak to the elite of Americans who happen to be black. But what about the 65% of them, that is, over 50% of them, that don't have that opportunity, has never benefited from affirmative action, have never really benefited long-term and the government largest? What about them?
They have benefited. I think if I had the...
Hold on. No, let me, and also, do you separate the plight of many blacks in this country from the overall people who consider themselves to be poor and still live in poverty? And on the lower rung of the ladder?
Oh, let's address those in turn. So I've had the benefit of my great aunt who taught me how to read and write, my great aunt Anissa. She was born in 1888. She was able to see a full century. She lived to be 106 years old and saw the full century of American progress. She knew Booker T. Washington. She knew W.B. Du Bois. And she could tell me as a child the progress that we have made as a people. Now, has the progress been as fast as we have wanted? Absolutely not. Do we need additional investments? Absolutely. We need infrastructure. We need educational institutions that are focused not just on discipline, but on bringing up the next generation. We need healthcare reform. We need the hand up, not the handout mentality to create millions of new black small businesses in these economic deserts that exist. It's amazing to me that you can see a giant metropolitan like Washington, D.C., a giant metropolitan city like Philadelphia, and then you look at a black city like Baltimore in the middle with none of the economic opportunity accreting to them despite having a major port, etc. So we have to start thinking smartly about how we invest in America to create the opportunities necessary. But when it comes to the plight of African Americans versus other groups, all you have to do is look back a century ago when we had Italian immigrants, Irish immigrants, other immigrant groups who were in the exact same ghettos, the exact same pot as African Americans. But when it was necessary, they were able to assimilate within to the white power structure and therefore lift up their communities as a result of that. We don't even think about those old European ethnic lines in large part anymore. African Americans, because there is a special racial segregation in America, because we had Jim Crow laws, because we had reverse redlining, because we had institutional efforts that were made to keep African Americans from advancing, that's why they haven't advanced faster than other groups. And then in order to explain it, they put together propaganda telling us the black folks are just lazy, they're criminals, they're violent, and that's why they haven't advanced, because that way you don't have to address the structural issues that are actually resulting in these numbers.
Well, then why do many American blacks in places like Chicago and Baltimore and New York and even in Washington, D.C. commit a disproportionate amount of the crime.
When you look at
that's just a fact, by the way.
Yeah, and we both like history.
They're not committing because they're blind.
Well, no, but we both like history, and we both research those things. And you could say the exact same thing about the Irish in the 19th century.
But we're not talking about the Irish right now. We're talking about where we are today. Like you just said, everybody has learned from each other how to do better and not repeat the same. What about this disproportionate number of blacks commit these crimes? It seems to continue, and it's overwhelming.
A perfect example. I mean, you're making the point for me, actually. If you look at the Irish, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, because the stereotype were that Irish people were drunk criminals who couldn't be controlled. If we look at all the Italian mobster movies, why were the Italians committing so much crime during that period of time? They were systemically taken away and barred from economic opportunity, and therefore they moved into the alternative economy.
But were they barred away from education?
They were barred from education at the time. If you look at.
But what about today?
And this is the point that I'm making, that when people are able to assimilate into the American populace writ large, that they move out of those places, so they're no longer seen with those stereotypes. We don't think about Irish people as being drunken, fighting people who rob folks all the time. We don't think about Italians as being mobsters anymore, because they've been able to assimilate into the American society. But when you have specific Jim Crow laws that prevent African Americans from doing that, when you have specific policies that suppress votes, when you have specific policies to stop investment into African American institutions, then that's how you end all these numbers.
Give me a year, 2030, 2040, 2050, when they will assimilate and then it'll become somebody else.
Well, the question has to become, when is America going to get rid of these rules and processes that have kept
But they have, except the mental. The mental shackles have not been removed.
There's more than just the mental.
But when are they going to, I'm curious to know, when are they going to assimilate?
The assimilation will happen when America takes down the
bars. You can't give me a date.
Well, it depends on the legislative action that's going to take place.
So it's going to take legislation?
Absolutely.
And a lot of these places, you're talking about, not like places like Baltimore. They've got a governor, they've got a mayor, they've got a legislature. Overwhelmingly power structure just happens to be black. Does that make a difference?
It has to be a national. We are a country. So
you had Obama. And like you just said, you may have Kamala.
And
is that going to change it? Is that going to speed it up?
The faces don't matter and the policies do. So we have to check.
Oh, the faces don't matter.
The faces don't matter, the policies do. I would take somebody who has a strong black agenda, if they were white, Asian, Indonesian, or anything else.
So it's not about race?
It's not about race. It's about putting the policies in place that will help those specific communities. There are plenty of black folks that will turn against you at any period of time. It's about people who are going to put the policies in place that will bridge this gap.
So I'm going to give Steve Laffey a chance to respond to Robert. Go ahead, Steve.
How to respond? I thought it's a little late in the game to keep saying this. The war on poverty started in '64. There's more poor people. I would hope that your eminent guest would agree that the one thing we can do is get every single kid in Detroit, in Chicago, in Baltimore, out of these public schools and get them a check so they can actually start learning. If you want black people, I don't care whether people are black or white or whatever, I don't care. If you want these poor people to start learning, they can't learn in public schools. Every single year we go through this, and every year we have this argument that somehow we're going to spend more money to improve public schools when a lot of this stuff's on the internet. The other thing is that the families have been breaking up. We can't have families with no father around. I have 6 children. Listen, this stuff, it's well beyond that we can keep saying that it's going to have to be this, we're going to need that, we're going to need policies. Everybody should be just treated the same. Why would we have any more of this affirmative action? Why? Let's go. I went to Bowdoin College. I remember my buddy DJ Norwood. He was there in affirmative action. He couldn't do the work. And he left. So as many people who say that that's a great program and not a good program, he would have been better off at a different college. And I hope he went there. I've never seen him again. So we just keep talking these same stuff. We do need policies. And another one policy to help young black families is to change the marginal tax rates to get out of poverty to 10% at the most. And 2, we need public schools to stop existing eventually. We need policies where people go to charter schools, homeschool, you name it, anything but the public schools in these inner cities.
Hold that, Steve. We're going to take a break and come back with some final thoughts here. Don't go away.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
So, Lori, listening to Robert, are migrants who come to this country, does it take them this long to assimilate? What is the trajectory then for them to find the American dream? Because listen, think about this, Lori. Many of them can't even speak their language. They don't know their culture. They don't know the laws. But yet some of them seem to adapt so quickly and realize the American dream. What's the difference?
Well, I'm glad to hear Robert talk about assimilation and the need for it. That used to be a much more central component of our immigration system, of our schools, of our civics. If you want to have unity, cohesion, a united states, then you need to have a similar understanding of history and of civics and loyalty to your neighbor and to your countrymen and to the flag, et cetera, et cetera. We used to teach this. But now, unfortunately, the left opposes assimilation and wants to continue to divide among cultures, among language, among nationality, among race, et cetera. And it is not serving our country well in terms of cohesion. And that is a big cause for why we're just fighting each other instead of where we truly need to be fighting our bad policies and leaders that don't have our best interests in mind.
But the immigrant, why is it some of them cut out a lot of steps and find the success?
Well, it depends. Are they willing to learn English? I mean, there have been plenty of studies where learning a common language gets you ahead faster. Are they able to financially support themselves or live with family who can support each other financially versus continuing to live on public welfare? And so these are principles that go back to our founding. And if those principles are encouraged, adopted, then immigrants who use those and pursue them are going to assimilate and therefore succeed faster.
This is a quick for everyone because we're about out of time. Has America seen its best days?
No, absolutely not. America is on the ascent, not the descent. America is still the shining light for the world. America is the most powerful nation, the strongest economy, the strongest military known in the history of mankind. We're the best, most free nation that the world has ever seen. And people who say that we're on the downward slide, well, you're essentially siding with the enemies of America. Right now, Congressman Jonathan Jackson is having a meeting with members of the African diaspora during Congressional Black Caucus leadership conference this weekend. The African leaders want to work with America because they understand that for their nation to prosper, they have to work in trade. They have to cooperate militarily. There's great power competition on the continent where India, China, Russia are all trying to influence. They want to work with America because they understand how strong America is. We can create another American century stronger than the last, stronger than ever before, but it will take unity. And we have to stop having about a half the country thinking that the country is about to catch on fire and be destroyed. We have to look towards our better angels and our better future and not think about the destruction, not think we're on the downside or decaying.
You know, Steve, I think of all the gifts from my parents, what has sustained me more than any of them is the importance of morality, the importance of faith, family, honor, integrity, moral striving, legal, moral, ethical, and believing that we were created by God and not evolved from some species. Speak to where are we in terms of our spirituality, and is spiritual illness sweeping and just eroding what could once have become a great empire?
Yes, and what we need a revival of Christianity in this country like we've seen in other centuries. It's really a disaster from what I can see in the last 40 years where people are not in churches. People are not, they have other ways of beliefs, but what held this country together is our belief in Jesus Christ. And if we don't bring that back, then everything else is a platitude. We have very giant problems in this country. and the platitudes are always nice that the better days are ahead of us. But if we don't solve these specific problems of national debt, education system, inflation, et cetera, and put us on the road forward, then our country will not survive. That's a certainty. But we need a revival of religion in our country. So we have what Laura talked about in another way, unity. You know, why would we ever go somewhere and it would be in Spanish? Someone tell me. I don't understand that at all. Everywhere I go, everything's in another language. I want it in English only. Not just because I'm selfish, I speak a little Spanish, so that we have more unity when everybody speaks a common language, have common beliefs. We can disagree about the Red Sox, the Yankees, the Nationals, but about our country we love. And that's what we're missing. We're missing it because so many people feel like they are so far removed from having success that they don't know what to do about it. The haves and the have-nots are worse. And without solving some of these great problems like Social Security, we're not going to make it, folks. It's just that simple. Countries do break up.
All the things that you talked about with immigration, and I can tell that you've lived this, you understand it better than anyone that I've talked to. Do you actually believe that if Donald Trump is elected president, everything that matters will be resolved, that he is the person that can get it on the right trajectory?
Well, he's already been in office and he has a record for his policies, which was to secure the border and to get rid of asylum fraud and to try and get more lawfulness and orderliness around our immigration system. Now, the left, lots of groups sued him at every turn to try to prevent those policies, and in some cases were successful. But he's a known quantity, his policies are known, and that is what he would seek to do again. And it is necessary if we actually want to have a lawful immigration system with integrity.
You know, something went dead in my ear. I hope it's not my batteries. I'm giving a hint to the control room, so I'm trying to figure out the time here, so help me. But listen, all I can tell you is this. This has been a very fascinating show today with all our guests. And one thing's for certain, they love this country. We may have different ways of how we save this country, how to make America prosperous again for everyone across the board, and how to make sure that we save the middle class, because the middle class is truly the backbone of America. And I got to look to make sure what I was just, I was trying to figure out whether I don't even know. I think my batteries are dead, but they have. I'm not dead. That's more important. But anyhow, I want to thank everybody for joining us on this edition of the Armstrong Williams Show. Thank you, Bruce Fein, Robert Patillo, Lora Ries, Steve Laffey. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Armstrong Williams, and enjoy the remainder of your weekend.